Hey everyone, and welcome to Seriously Risky Biz. This is the podcast we do here at Risky Business, all about cybersecurity policy and intelligence. My name is Amberly Jack, and in just a moment I will chat to Tom Uran, our policy and intelligence editor, all about the Seriously Risky Business newsletter that is up on our website today. You can, of course, read that and subscribe over at risky.biz. First, though, I'd like to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for supporting Tom's work here at Risky Biz, and also Lawfare, who syndicate Tom's newsletter and publish it on the Lawfare Media website. Finally, this week's episode is sponsored by Okta, so big thanks to them for that. And g'day, Tom.
G'day, Amberly. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. And keen to chat to you about one of the pieces that you've written about in your newsletter today is that there's new legislation that's been proposed in the US, which would essentially give private sector authority to hack foreign cybercrime entities targeting the US. And on the surface, I mean, scam farms is in the title of this bill, so it kind of looks like, okay, private sector can hack scam compounds, and that doesn't seem so bad, but apparently there's a little bit more to it, and it's a bit more complicated than that, Tom.
Yeah. So the bill, it's called the Scam Farms Mark and Reprisal Authorization Act. So it rests on old-time, what we call letters of marque. And these were basically government licenses that would allow privateers to attack and steal the goods of the ships of other nations. And this was like, they were used from like the 13th to the 19th, early 19th century. So these are old-time government authorities. And the idea is, every now and then, people have said we should have cyber letters of marque, where you would authorize private sector actors to go and hack, because hacking is a big problem. And so more hacking is the solution.
Right.
Now, that's probably an unfair characterization of the argument, but this particular bill basically says the president can decide that if there's a cyber criminal group, that they could authorize a private sector hacker or group to go and hack whatever or anything anywhere in the world, as long as it's outside the US.
So not just scam farms then?
Yeah, anyone the president doesn't like, as long as you can, I guess, plausibly say that they're a criminal. And, you know, criminal is, to some, at least, in the eye of the beholder. So it was tremendously broad, not at all limited to scam farms.
Yeah, that feels a little misleading. Side note.
It's more like hack anything or anyone that the president wants, Bill. So that made me think back to the previous time this has come up was the Active Cyber Defense Authorization or Certainty Act, the ACDC Act. And the basic idea, why this idea keeps on coming back, is that there's all this latent private sector capacity to do hacking things in the US. And it basically doesn't get used while other states are using contractors to hack or have relationships with their cyber criminal underground. And so it feels like there's a bit of an unfair playing field. And so is there any way that the US can usefully use that capacity? And so this perennially comes up, and each time it comes up, the answer is, well, there seem like there's too many problems. So the contrast with the ACDC Act is interesting in that it was designed to give private sector companies some tools to deal with hacks. And if they were attacked, the idea was that they could, air quotes, hack back to do a certain limited number of things, like attribution, try and protect themselves, or do things like delete stolen data. Now, none of this made sense to me in that, like, you can delete stolen data from somewhere, but like it's just one copy command away from being stolen permanently. Like there's no guarantees you can do that. A lot of the technical arguments didn't make sense. And also, thinking about it, there's a vast majority, or there's just a vast swathe of threat actors that attack US interests. Yep. So you're effectively saying with the ACDC Act, any US company can respond to anyone who attacks it. And that pretty much opens up the field to everyone, from commodity cyber criminal groups all the way up to the most most amazing state-based intelligence groups. Like those are the range of threat actors attacking the US. So it was, even though it sort of felt like it was targeted because it was only the threat actor that attacked you, en masse, it was like most of the planet. So the concerns with hacking back are, are you going to hack the right person or group? Yeah. Like getting that right seems important. Are you going to cause collateral damage? Are you going to interfere with state operations that are going on? So if NSA or Cyber Command or FBI has an operation going on, they don't want random hackers turning up and muddying the waters, making mistakes, getting them caught. And when you've got such a large, I guess, scope, it's like that's just impossible to deal with. So the ACDC went nowhere. Now, at least in theory, the Scam Farms Act feels like it should be targeted on scam farms. And if it was, I think it actually, like, that makes sense, because scam farms are huge, they're industrialized, they're decentralized. There's no single point that the FBI or NSA or Cyber Command could attack where they would have, they would really get bang for the buck.
Yeah, right.
Like, those operations make sense when you can understand the network, you can find a key point, you can do something that's, if not decisive, it's at least significant. It doesn't feel like that for scam farms that place exists. So it feels to me that even though they're a huge problem, like they cause a lot of harm and damage, I'm not sure that state action, at least in the cyber realm, will make that much difference. But perhaps like broad-based private sector-based action could make some sort of difference. And the second thing is that you're not, like you've got a limited number of actors. Now, it's a huge ecosystem, but it's a positive, here's a group that you can go after. The president could say, you can go after these specific things, not anyone who happens to hack you. Yeah. So I think that the bill, even though it's problematic, it highlights that there are some threat actors out there where maybe the private sector would be part of the solution.
Yeah, for sure. Just going back to it's got a few problems. I did like in the newsletter that you sort of highlighted that it's a little bit light on some details, like where the money goes.
That's right. Yeah. So it says you can hack anyone or anything, but it doesn't say what you do with the money. So if you're a privateer, it would, like, I think, being able to hack anyone and anything, or anything the president specifies to get money, that seems like a great deal. There's a tremendous profit incentive. But from a societal point of view, I think it makes sense that you would give like most of the money back to the victims. And how would you do that? I don't know. So that all seems like problematic. But I think, like, you step back, the big picture idea, I think, makes a lot of sense.
So, and that's kind of what I get from reading your piece as well, is if it stuck to those scam compounds, that seems kind of fair and kind of worthwhile. So basically what you're saying is this bill will be left on the shelf of unused bills to die.
I spoke to a number of people. They thought that it would not go anywhere. The ACDC Act had quite a few co-sponsors, I think like 18 or something like that. So that felt like a serious bill. They thought it through. To me, this one doesn't feel the same because, like, what happens to the money? Like, you've got to have that in there. Like, that seems like a key detail.
A little bit important, yeah.
And there's no co-sponsors. It felt to me like there's this thing called a messaging bill, which is you don't expect it to pass, but you float it up as a think piece, something to provoke thought. And I think for that purpose, it's actually quite good. Like, I think to me, it made me think through the implications of who you would try and get the private sector to attack. And if it doesn't seem like the US is going to adopt the China or Russia solution, for good reason. I don't think it makes sense for the US, but this seems like perhaps a position that would make sense.
And that's the thing at the end of the day, I guess, is getting people talking is a first step to these things a lot of the time. So maybe that's what this will do.
Maybe. It's a brave new world.
And another thing that I mean we never see on the desks here at the Risky Biz newsroom is both Microsoft and China. But the latest between Microsoft and China, Tom, is Microsoft's made a bit of a move with its MAP program that seems to suggest they're maybe finally learning some pretty painful lessons about putting their blind trust in China. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this feels like a long historical journey. So the immediate news is that Microsoft has a program it calls MAP, the Microsoft Active Protection Program, where it gives certain, air quotes, trusted vendors the advance warning of bugs. And in the past, it used to give them proof of concept code that would actually exploit the vulnerability. Now, it turns out that Microsoft is depending upon how you phrase it, scaling back that program for Chinese vendors. And the concern is that Chinese vendors have at times in the past taken that proof of concept code and perhaps given it to Chinese intelligence agencies or Chinese hacking contractors or whoever. So there have been a couple of incidents, this most recent SharePoint hacking incident, and back in the past Microsoft Exchange, a mass hacking incident where there's been the suspicion that the bug has leaked from MAP to Chinese hackers. So the Exchange incident was back in 2000. They kicked some vendors out of the program back then. This incident happened obviously this year, and they've basically scaled back all the sharing for Chinese vendors. So instead of getting proof of concept code ahead of time, they'll just be given a general description at the same time the patch is pushed out. So that's a pretty significant change.
You sort of say, they're looking at whether those leaks could have come from that program, but there were a few places they could have come from,
that's
right?
Yeah. So it turns out that the most recent vulnerability, SharePoint, the engineering team that maintained SharePoint was actually based in China. And so there's the other possibility is that the leak came directly from Microsoft itself and its China-based engineers. And the reason that China is a concern is it has laws which say that if you're anyone, you have to help with intelligence work. So Microsoft has gone through a long phase over the last couple of decades where it's basically not cared about security enough, in my view. So it's prioritized doing things quickly and cheaply rather than doing them securely. So in that period, it made a number of decisions about how much to trust China-based engineering teams. One of those is with SharePoint. Another one we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, it had China-based engineers helping to maintain US Department of Defense systems. Now, if you really care about security, both of those are non-starters. Like, you would just immediately eliminate them as like thought bubbles. Like they go on the brainstorming blackboard and they are crossed out immediately. Now,
But no.
Microsoft has had in past year or so a revelation that, actually security is important. If we don't get it right, it undermines trust in everything for the second time in 20 years. The first time was back in 97. And it took really a Cyber Safety Review Board report which said, it talked about Microsoft's cascade of security failures. It was a very, very harsh report. And I think that was the moment that the eyes opened and people there went, actually, this is a serious problem. The government is losing trust in what we do. This is a big problem for our business. And they had launched a Secure Future initiative, and they basically embiggened it. And the CEO, Satya Nadella, sent out a memo saying security is the top priority. At the time, I thought that was good news. It is still good news. I think it has made some difference. But what they didn't do was go and revisit all the decisions they made about who do we trust, all of the decisions they made in that decade or so where they basically like sort of fudged security. Like, I think both of those, the SharePoint decision and the government cloud being maintained in China, those are not decisions you could possibly conceive of making if you really cared about security. But they didn't go and revisit them. So it feels like to me there's this legacy, I would call it, I guess, a trust debt, where you've pushed your trust in places that you really shouldn't. And it doesn't seem like they've revisited those decisions, and they're learning, one bad news story at a time, that this is a problem. So Nadella, in his memo that placed security as a top priority, he said, security is a team sport, and they're only just realizing that some of their players are actually potentially playing for a different team.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you love predictions, Tom. But I'm going to ask you here, they're obviously learning these lessons. They're obviously learning them quite late. How hard is this going to be to climb out of this kind of web that they've spun for themselves?
I think it's going to be extremely painful. So, for example, we spoke about this with the US Department of Defense Cloud. It said that they're not going to be using China-based engineers anymore. And I joked at the time that just leaves Indian, Brazilian, every other country's engineers. And I think they face a capacity constraint where there's not enough well-trained engineers that they want to pay to do this work. So undoubtedly they'll do things like look to AI to fix the problem. I think it'll take time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we might leave it on there, Tom, but thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks, Amberly.